What, Mr. Chair, Shelley, you are recommending for sure that this curb cut, it's not a driveway, but it's used all day long, constantly as a driveway, that be eliminated, correct?
Through the chair, we have consulted with facilities staff, both in community services and in public works, and both of those areas also, along with risk management, support removing that area. However, there has been suggestions during the committee discussion that we actually have a designated service area spot on either Court or Lot Street, as we have in other areas where there's libraries and public buildings, to be closer to the spot but not navigate with pedestrian traffic.
There we go. Solution. And Mr. Chair, it'll be fun to watch next year the first snowfall, people thinking that there isn't a curb there, because they come in there sometimes pretty good speed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Wells, next, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I wish to hone in on that as well. And I was very much surprised by this recommendation. As you know, I'm not a great supporter of this particular change that we'll be making to the courtyard. However, sticking to that, how many accidents have actually occurred with cars backing in, driving in, unloading, and that sort of thing in that spot?
Through the chair, we've had one car hit the library and have had damage as a result. We've had several near misses that have been reported with almost hitting pedestrians in that area.
And Mr. Chair, I am very concerned if we take away that, and it's easy to say, where in this report it says additional accessible parking spaces are suggested to accommodate those with mobility issues. Where are we going to find this extra parking?
Through the chair, and I'll ask perhaps Shelby to comment as well. We have had discussions with the roads department. Councillor Black has attended the site on various times, and also through our other accessibility group about incorporating some additional accessible spots on Court Street or Lot Street. We've had some questions and comments come forward that there isn't enough accessible spots in that corridor serving the church community surrounding Governor Simcoe Square as well as the library. So certainly something for discussion, but it is on the top of our list and several comments have come forward. But if Shelby has anything more to add, I'd ask her to add it.
Yeah, through you to Councillor well, sorry.
You can call me anything you want. I don't care because I've been called worse.
Sorry. Yes, on both Court and Lot Street, we've discussed, sorry, I'm going to get them mixed up, but the one on this side of the Court Street, there is the one parking at the top at Talbot Street, that we would look to improve that and possibly change some of the bump out of the concrete there to add potentially have it as 2 accessible parking spaces. And then the spots on Lot Street that are designated as accessible, they're only designated as accessible on Sundays, I believe for the churches on that street. So we would look at making changes to those potentially to make true accessible parking spots that are permanent.
Mr. Chair, I am reluctant to do anything that might reduce some parking spaces, even though this one is not truly a parking space. And the reason I say that is, for those of you who sit around this council table, and most of us around here who drive our cars know that we're not supposed to be parking over in that town center parking lot. Didn't they tell us they didn't want us parking there at one time? And yet you go there and most of the parking spaces in that parking lot are taken up by our staff. What would happen if they said, seriously, get out of there? Where are we going to go then? We'll have more serious issues than accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black, then Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was at the Accessibility Advisory Committee this morning, and we did talk about this further. I did ask some of those same questions that are being asked around the table, and there still is some money in the budget. There's, I think, Council, it was proposed to do 4 spots, and Council agreed to 2, which are on Court down at the east end, and the other 2 were supposed to be considered at a later time up at this end. And just as Shelby said, the bump outs. If you look at the bump out area there, it's quite large. There's a lot of room right there, and that's what they did. They took some of that space down at the east end, and they put the wheelchair spots in there. So it worked out really well, and that's, I think, what they're proposing at this end. A question through you to staff. Could we not, because I asked this as well this morning, off of Talbot Street, could we not have a space that was cordoned off with bullards, a few bullards that said, here's our space, you know, and put a sign up, you know, it's a parking spot for service vehicles, and stay out and don't enter?
Through the chair, I'm going to lightly tap Ms. Robinson and ask for her technical knowledge from an engineering standpoint on if that's feasible on that road.
Through the chairman to council, I guess that there's a lot of different options and things can be considered. If council's direction back to staff is to go and evaluate different alternatives, we could certainly do that. Sort of the intent of this was not really to deal with a parking issue, so we weren't really evaluating different potential ways of doing parking. This was to actually deal with the square and the fact that we have vehicles driving into what is reasonably assumed by the general public to be a pedestrian area. So we haven't fully evaluated all around the area for parking. Should council wish us to do that, we can most certainly look into that, but that wasn't really the intent of this, so it hasn't been fully investigated at this point.
Okay, thank you for that. And I don't know if you're ready. Are you ready for a motion? Because I'd be ready to move the
All right.
motion in the report.
Councillor Black, I'll accept you as the mover, thank you, but I do have one further speaker, and that's Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I remember it was more than 50 years ago, there used to be a jail over here, and a truckload of tomatoes came down, lost its brakes, and went right through the wall. I don't know if the inmates got out or not. But anyway, just a little tidbit of history. If we move this loading unloading zone to Court Street, would we then change the door that the courier comes in on? Because some of them boxes and pushing that cart that he uses, it's pretty heavy. Would we change the configuration to allow him to come in at a different door?
Through the chair, I think what staff's intent today is to take this project or get some support from council, take this project back and consult with our departments, and we can certainly take the issue of the courier unloading and service vehicles back to the committee and look at those architectural designs, get some updates and some options for council to consider, given the feedback that you've provided tonight. So certainly we'll take that under advisement and provide some options for council.
You're welcome. Councillor Black.
Move the recommendation in the report and speak to it.
Thank you very much. I'll do that first, Councillor, and then I'll give you a chance as well. Councillor Black has moved that staff report EBS 17-13 CAB Courtyard be received as information, and that council continue to support the county administration building, courtyard, and ramp barrier-free program capital budget projects as previously approved by council. Councillor Black first, and then Sonnenberg to the motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess some history. Probably this whole thing started with a number of calls to myself, people complaining that there isn't enough wheelchair access around the county administration building. And for that matter, as Councillor Wells has indicated, not enough county-owned parking spaces. Anyway, we started to look at this at the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and then it sort of snowballed, and we realized that there was more to it than just the wheelchair accessibility, and all these other elements have come up. So, you know, I've asked for a plan myself because I thought it's a lot easier to look at a plan and pick it apart and figure out what the costs are. And if you look out there, I don't know if the report said anything about the one tree. If you look at the roof, I think we did replace that roof with cedar shakes at one time, not that long ago, and there's mold buildup on the one side there because of the one tree. I hate to see the tree go, but, maybe that's a consideration because of the roof. And, of course, really, I think it was, I guess, the type of design of the age when it was created, but really, it's not the most appropriate, and it has created problems with attracting skateboarders. And like the actual bylaw of the Governor Simcoe Square does not permit bicycles or skateboarders, and yet they're there all the time. And I don't know if any bylaw person is going to actually get out there and start chasing those kids away. So this may solve some problems if it was filled in. And I have some concerns on costs as well. I don't want to see all the trees go. The wells and the concrete around it are breaking apart. It does need to be dealt with. And if it could be leveled and we could retain some of the surface areas to reduce some of the costs, but certainly it would improve it for not just wheelchair accessible people or people with accessibilities, but for everyone. So I support it because this will enable us to get a more detailed architectural drawing so we can visually see what it is that they want to do and what the costs are for. Hopefully they're going to give us a breakdown of each item, like what's the cost to remove the tree or how many or so on and so forth. So then that way we'll have a lot better idea, can make a better decision at that time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. I will be supporting this initiative. We have to rid that area of that driveway. You can't have cars and vans backing into what is a pedestrian area. We're asking for trouble. If no one's been run over yet, they will be eventually. I'm in the process of getting a building permit to build a garage, and I have to be so many meters from the nearest drip line of a tree. We have a tree out here that's right overgrowing the roof. That's got to be corrected. Obviously, whether we remove the entire tree, at least cut off some branches. This, to me, is the flagship building of this county, and the whole area out there is tired and run down. It needs refurbishing. So let's spend a little bit of money and improve the appearance of the entrance to this, our most important building. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. Guys, do support the motion here. I will look into tree trimming. There was a tree on the southeast corner out there, a locust tree that was on the shingle roof last spring, and it was trimmed way back. I made a note here. I'll look into that tomorrow to see what it looks like and see if more trimming, and get a hold of our friend Adam. Secondly, I am pleased that the picnic table sunken areas will be level. Get rid of them. And thirdly, I do agree that either we create a driveway or we get rid of the curb. It is a pedestrian walking area. It's a very busy pedestrian area. And if we can find alternate ways to unload and accommodate, then let's keep the vehicles out on the street. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mayor Luke. Any further speakers to the motion? I don't think you need me to read it again. It's in your report, so I will call the question. Those in favor? Anyone opposed? I see one opposed. Thank you, Councillor. That motion does pass. And Shelley, again, just to reassure Council, this will come back again in a more formalized fashion before the 2018 capital budget for further discussion.
That's correct, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman. We'll have some designs and some proposed costing, and then given the direction of council, we'll propose the option in the 2018 capital budget.
Thank you. That will allow us to move on to our next report, which is EBS 17-19, the Corporate Accessibility Policy. And Shelby, you're going to lead this one. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the legislated changes to the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. And additionally, the purpose of this report is to amend EBS 54, Corporate Accessibility Policy. Legislated changes happened and came into force July 1st of 2016, and it now includes all 5 accessibility standards under one regulation and changes to the customer service standard. EBS 54, Corporate Accessibility Policy, has been amended to incorporate the regulation changes, and the policy was reviewed by our Accessibility Advisory Committee, the Corporate Accessibility Committee, our corporate leadership team, and senior leadership team. The amendments to the Corporate Accessibility Policy supports Norfolk County in meeting the current legislated requirements of the AODA and its regulations. So in your packages, you'll see 2 copies of the policy. One is a clean version of it, and the other is to show the track changes. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you very much for that. Mayor Luke first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question, and I'm not sure, Shelby, if you can answer it, and if not, maybe our deputy clerk. And there's been a lot of editing and revising of EBS 54. Thank you for that. But when we get to taxi cabs, it says on page 7 of 10 that Norfolk County shall ensure owners and operators of taxi cabs licensed by Norfolk County are prohibited from charging a higher fare or additional fee for persons with disabilities, etc. And I'm not aware that that has ever happened in Norfolk County. Shelby, do you know if that is the case, or is this just to make sure that there is something in writing?
Through you, the chair, to Mayor Luke, yes, that is the standard that's required in the legislation, and it's also outlined on our tariff cards for taxis. So it's just to ensure that since we license taxi cabs, that we're outlining what they can or cannot do. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Wells.
Just a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'll just get it from staff for clarification. We don't have any choice in this, do we?
through you, the mayor, to Councillor Wells, it is a legislated requirement to have a policy and document our policies. How we write it is up to us, but we have outlined what the legislation is.
I think that's my point, Mr. Chair. We can spend all the time we want talking about it. It's Big Brother is telling us that we have to do it, and we don't have any choice. You know, I'm old now, and most of you know that I'm going to be leaving, and I'm pleased that I'm leaving. Because when I was younger, we had power. I sit around this table and wonder why people pay me. Because the province tells us what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor, but I can assure you there are going to be a lot of people not happy when you decide to step down. Any further speakers? And I do require someone to move the recommendation in the report. Councillor Geisens, thank you very much. You've got the report, the resolution there in front of you. I will read it for the benefit of our audience. Councillor Geisens has moved that staff report EBS 17-19, Corporate Accessibility Policy, be received as information, and that the amended EBS-54 Corporate Accessibility Policy be adopted by Norfolk County Council. Those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? That does carry. Thank you for that, Shelby. And that will allow us to move on to our next report, CSD 17-04, the award of ash tree removal tender for 2017. This is a bit of a good news report, I think. And to present it will be Adam Biddle, who is our Superintendent of Forestry. Welcome, Adam, and please go ahead and present your report.
Thank you. Through you, the Chair, staff report CSD 1704 is a staff report regarding the award of ash tender removals 2017. And the recommendation is that this report be received as information and that the General Manager of CSD be authorized to execute a contract with Quality Tree Service for the supply of labor, materials, and equipment for the removal of ash trees specified in tender CSD PFR 1701 in the amount of $55,628. This program is part of the ongoing ash tree removal program initiated 3 years ago. The 2017 ash tree removal budget is in the amount of $200,000, and through this program we are targeting the highest risk ash along county roadways, parks, and cemeteries. The ash tree tender, CSD PFR 1705, was issued in accordance with Norfolk County purchasing policy and tender procedures, and it was closed on March 7th, 2017. 9 tender packages were received before closing. The summary of all those bids are shown in the report. The lowest bid was Quality Tree Service with a total of $55,628. Some of the financial services comments include that the approved budget is within the allotted operating budget, or the $55,000 is within the budget. The funding for this budget is issued through debentures, which is why we're bringing this report forward. Any outstanding funds will be brought forward again to this council before award. In conclusion, we're recommending that council authorize the general manager of CSD to award this current contract to Quality Tree Service for $55,628.
Thank you very much. Questions? And I saw Councillor Wells first, and then Mayor Luke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, question. Did I read this correctly, that we are going to remove 885 trees for $55,000? That's only like $63 per tree. Did I read that correctly?
Right, so through you, the chair, a portion of this work is along a trail. So in that number, there are a number of smaller trees. We're identifying along the trails any ash to go. So with that, you do get a little bit of an inflated number. The costs come down a little bit. In these areas, the cleanup is also limited due to equipment access, so there is limited cleanup in some of these areas. So that's part of the reason why this is a significantly low bid. We were surprised by that, but that is part of the reason, yes.
If that's a good news report, as opposed to some other reports.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Luke.
Well, I have a couple of questions through you to Adam. Adam, thank you. Was cleanup the successful bidder last year? I think we only had 2 or 3 quotes on it last year. If my mind is correct, was it cleanup?
Yes, cleanup, I think we had a couple tenders last year for the ash removal. I believe cleanup did he secured one of the tenders. Zapp's Tree Service secured the first tender.
Well, Mr. Chair, where is Quality Tree from?
Through the chair, Quality Tree Services from Acton. We do not have any prior experience with this contractor.
Do we have more phases, obviously, of ash to do?
Right, this, and I guess I left that out in the financial comments, this is the third of 5 phases. Council had originally approved 5 phases of $200,000 to go towards the ash tree removals. This would be phase 3.
So my last question, Mr. Chair, is this, and I was thinking we spent $120,000 last year, and again, I don't know, but these tenders seem to be low. We had $200,000 budgeted for 2017. Why would we maybe not, since the tenders are so low and the money's there, why would we not look at combining the first tender at $56,000, the second tender at $73,74, which is just under $130,000? Why would we not look at the money's in the bank, so to speak? Why would we not? So if we're going to spend $130 this year on a $200,000 budget, it would seem to me make sense to get on with this. I don't know if that's even procedurally proper to accept first.
I see John waving his hand over there, so
I
I'll
figured
defer to John.
I figured, Mr. Chair, they'd want to chip in here.
Mr. Ford, can you help us on this?
Okay, I think I can help out. The project that Mayor Luke is talking about with respect to $73,000 is an earlier project that had had its own budget and approval and tender and all that stuff. The budget the document that's in front of you today is intended specifically to approve the tender for $54,000. I think there's a comment in the report. I don't have the report in front of me right now, but I think there's a comment in the report, as I recall, since I wrote it, that a second report is going to be coming to council shortly to present the option of using the remaining $146,000 and issuing another tender. I don't think that we could extend the current tender to be more than what it is, because that's the way it was tendered. So this report only deals with the tender of 54,000. A subsequent report will deal with the additional funds that are earmarked and move to an additional phase of the ash tree removal program.
Mr. Chair, I accept that, but I came up with $73,000 based on the tender of the second lowest bidder of $73,500 here behind Quality. I assume these were all tenders on the same project.
Right, if I could just tag on to what John said, the budget for this year is $200,000. When we put these tenders together, we're trying to keep that in mind and keeping the workload within that budget. If you look at the bid prices, we range from $128,000 right down to $55,000. So we're trying to keep within that $200,000 range without going over, which would require a request for additional funds. So when we're putting these tenders out, we're trying to stay within budget. And as you can see, there's a wide spectrum of bids that we get. So this one did come in significantly less. We do have additional ash work to get done, so that will be addressed through additional tenders throughout the course of this year and awarded accordingly.
Additional tenders, Mr. Chair, as long as we don't go over the 200,000.
Right.
So we still got 144 here to work with.
That's right, oh yeah.
So I guess if we can't accept the second tender as well, and I get that, it's on a specific area.
No, because these bids are all for the same job.
I understand that. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, wouldn't hurt my feelings, see a second tender go right out to get some more of this work done.
Yep, we certainly have all the trees inventoried, and we do have another tender ready to go. Yep.
Thank you. And that is actually in the report, so we understand that. So I think staff were aware. They'll probably come back with that later on this year. Councillor Geisens next, and then Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommendation on page 38, but I do have a question. How long is it going to take us to clear up the ash tree that are out there? 10 years, 5 years?
Through the chair, currently where we're at, we don't have a full-scale inventory for every tree in the county. What we've addressed so far is all the urban areas. So this tender that we've just awarded will clean up the rest of the urban areas. This tender included one last ravine in Dover, a few trails, and a few areas in Cortland and Simcoe. Moving forward, we're looking at county roads, the main roads, and a few of the hamlets that never got picked up with the urban area. So right now we don't have a full grasp on how many ash are out there, but we do have a good feeling that the bulk of the highest risk are done, and now it's cleaning up rural roadsides and county roads.
So you don't have any idea what's along the roadside or anything like that?
We're getting a better handle on that now as we prepare the next tender, inventorying the county roadsides, but I hope to have more of that information in the next report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus, followed by Sonnenberg.
Mr. Chairman, question to Adam. What about the stumps? Do we remove the stumps out with this contract, or?
This, when we award these tenders, it does include full cleanup, stump removal, topsoil, grass seeding, and all that, with the exception of some of the natural areas where they're not on roadside, there's no hazard or liability for leaving the stump, we'll leave those ones.
So we do have an amazing price. Thanks.
Councillor Sonnenberg.
Through you to Adam. Does this wood have any value once the tree is cut down, or does it have to be destroyed to prevent further spread of disease, or what becomes of the trees that are taken down?
Through the chair, when we tender out these ash trees, the material becomes a product of the contractor, so they're responsible for the removal. How they utilize that wood, I know we have a few local guys that'll sell it as firewood and what have you, but when we price these jobs out, it's for a complete removal of the material, so that material does become the property of the contractor at that time. So whether they find a use for it or not, typically it's really low value in terms of timber, especially the roadside and park trees. There's always the possibility for foreign materials, nails, and that sort of thing. The sawmills are not interested in it. If the contractor can find a niche market for a local woodworker or a firewood supplier that will buy the material, that's a benefit to them, and it may be reflective in their price, but that material is no longer the county's once we issue these tenders.
Continue.
So this pest that we're dealing with here has no threat to any other type of trees when this wood is transported around?
The ash borer is specific to ash species. The CFIA is the regulating body on the quarantine zones for emerald ash borer. Initially, when it was found in 2007 in Norfolk County, they were quarantining specific areas, specifically Norfolk, a 5-kilometer zone around Turkey Point. As they got more research and more things developed in terms of the spread of the insect, they kept expanding those boundaries. Currently, the quarantine zone in Ontario is somewhere up by Ottawa south, so ash wood can move freely within those zones, provided it's not moving out of that quarantine zone.
You're welcome. Seeing no further speakers, Councillor Geisens has been kind enough to move the motion, and I will read that to you now. That is that staff report CSD 17-04, award of tender ash tree removal for 2017 be received as information, and that the General Manager of Community Services be authorized to execute a contract with Quality Tree Service for the supply of labor, materials, and equipment for the removal of ash trees as specified in tender CSD PFR 17-01 in the amount of $55,628 excluding taxes. Those in favor of that recommendation? It is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Adam, for your report. We'll see if we can get a couple more reports and decisions in. I am going to call about a 10-minute break before 5 because we do have our deputations and others that will commence at 5 o'clock relative to deputations. But our next report is Staff Report HS 17-01, dealing with our social housing central waiting list statistical report. Marlene Miranda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a routine housing report of the centralized waiting list in Haldimand, Norfolk, which is a listing of all the people in Haldimand and Norfolk counties who have applied for and been deemed eligible for subsidized rent geared to income housing operated by any of our 11 social housing providers located. As you can see through the report, there hasn't been any significant changes in the trends over the years, and for this past year, which is in the report, we've been at approximately 265 households that are on our central waiting list. We did have a small spike in the last quarter at 278. I just would like to point out in the report that with the development of Hamilton Hall, we were able to house 17 single households from our centralized waiting list, and the rest were filled by applicants directly through Hamilton Hall. On page 4 of the report, too, I just wanted to bring it to your attention that we have started the Victims of Domestic Violence Portable Benefit Housing Pilot Program, where we were identified as one of the pilot sites. And it is a portable benefit, and we have had 9 households receiving the benefit through this, and this pilot will end in March 31st of 2018. At this point, we don't have any update on evaluation. It's too soon in the program, but we will bring that forward. In summary, staff remain concerned with the continuing pressures for access to safe, clean, and affordable renting housing for members of our community, and are continually looking for strategies to address this issue and provide support to those applicants while they are waiting. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Marlene, for that. I see at least one, and that's Councillor Black, please.
Mr. Chairman, just to move the recommendation to receive this information in the report.
Thank you very much. Any further speakers? Seeing none, then Councillor Black has moved that we receive staff report HS 17-01, Social Housing 2016 Central Waiting List Stats Year-End Report as information. Those in favor? I see no one is opposed, so that is carried. Thank you very much for that, Marlene. Now, Council, I'm going to, if you'll bear with me, jump around a little bit, assuming staff are ready to go with reports when we come to them. I think, Madam Deputy Clerk, we need to do our deputations at 5 o'clock because we know people expect those and will be here wanting to watch and listen. So I'm going to ask Council to move down to further staff reports. And more particularly, I'm going to start with staff report FS 17-09, which is the Statement of Council Remuneration and Expenses. That is on page 83 of your agenda. And turn to staff to deal with that report for us. Who's going to do that? Mr. Ford? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the report the council sees every year at this time. We're required to provide that statement of remuneration and expenses every year for council members and appointed members of councils appointed to local boards and commissions. Other than that, I don't really have much more to say about it, and if there's any questions, we'll glad to entertain them.
Thank you very much for that, and I apologize in advance doing this to people. We're going to jump around just a little bit. So, Council, you've seen the report. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation on page 83? Thank you very much, Councillor Wells. Councillor Wells has moved that staff report FS 17-09, which is the statement of council remuneration and expenses, be received as information. Those in favor? No one is opposed to that, so it does carry. And let's move on then, Mr. Baird. Are you going to be handling the heritage designation reports for us? Good. So we will try and tackle DCS 17-30, which is the Norfolk Heritage Committee designation report for Quants Mill. Mr. Baird.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief here. We do have two reports on the agenda tonight that deal with heritage designations. Our first one is on page 87 of your agenda, and it deals with the Quant Sawmill in Delhi, just down the hill from the Delhi Tobacco and Heritage Center Museum. You see before you, this is council had previously authorized the Heritage Committee to proceed with a research paper that would support the designation of the sawmill. Of course, the sawmill is owned by Norfolk County, so they have prepared, as attached to the report, the designation details. I was just reading it earlier today, and I noticed there's really sawmills and grist mills were some of the very first industries in Norfolk County. And being the former forest capital of Canada, it's interesting to see. In 1851, there were over 112 sawmills in Norfolk County alone. They produced over 40 million board feet, which is quite an accomplishment in that day. The report was prepared by Mary Cahill, who is a board member on our Heritage Committee. And it's a very good read, and it makes recommendations for the different elements that are being recommended for designation. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. There may be some questions or comments, starting with Councillor Black and then Mayor Luke.
I was just ready to move the...
Okay, thank you. I'll get you to do that. Mayor Luke, did you have a comment, question, or were you going to do the same? Okay. Please, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
So speaking in favor of the motion, well, first of all, when we read through Mary Cahill, and by the way, she writes up a good designation report, believe me, but there's no question that this mill was key to the establishment and the beginnings of the community of Delhi. So my question, Mr. Chair, is there anybody in this council chamber that has seen the inside of this building? Mr. Chair, a couple have, or two or three. How do we get to see the inside of this building? I've never been able to get in there.
Alyssa Culver.
Guess I got to have some connections.
Talk
Anyhow,
to the mayor.
I just really think this is very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I know I missed someone. Councillor Columbus, next.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very fitting to designate this as a heritage designation site. And especially being that 33%, I believe it is, of our Norfolk County is covered in woodlot. So there's a lot of silviculture out there. And it is in the Quants Park, which a lot of visitors take place right next to the Tobacco Museum. And as Mayor Luke said, it did stimulate growth for the community of Delhi. Back then it had a different name, Fredericksburg, I believe. And, we don't have many of these types of sawmills left in the province, so it's nice to have it sitting there for, hopefully people will be able to come and visit it and enjoy what's in there, what's left in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. I'll certainly be supporting this, but Mr. Baird mentioned how extensive the lumber industry was in this county at one time. There was an area about a mile from my home that was once called Circularville, named after the huge circular saw that was in the mill. So just a little tidbit of useless information. Thank you.
He's making these stories up.
No such thing, Councillor. It all is useful. Before I go back to Councillor Black, who agreed to move it, the one little thing I want to say, Mr. Baird, that caught my attention as well was reference to the early power supply being provided at Croton. And I guess the Quantz brothers were involved in that entrepreneurial adventure back at the turn of the 20th century, and that was neat as well.
This tree was alive and well in those days too, Councillor Oliver.
It sure was. So, thank you for all those comments. Councillor Black has been good enough to move the recommendation, and I will read it to us. Would you like to speak to it further, Councillor Black?
Well, that's why I moved it.
Yep, thank you. Staff report DCS 17-30, Quantz Sawmill be received as information, and that the request for heritage designation of the Quantz Sawmill as recommended by the Norfolk Heritage Committee in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act be approved, and further that the clerk be directed to undertake the necessary procedures to designate the Quantz Sawmill of historic significance under the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the necessary bylaw be presented to Council for adoption. Speaking further, Councillor Black.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm your representative on the Heritage Committee. And I too, like the mayor, want to congratulate Mary Cahill. She is the chair of the committee and has done a lot of this work, but also there was a student, and his name was Wesley Wilson, and he is going to be studying, I think he's studying now, heritage architecture and that sort of thing at university, and he did a major contribution to this, and I believe Mary's working out of the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum and probably got quite a bit of information from there, along with Wesley's help. And I would hope, because there is a wealth of information in here. It was very interesting, and some of the things have been mentioned already. But I would hope that people will go on our Norfolk County website, because there is an interactive map. And if you go there, and you can, once this is up, you can click on the map where the location is and the actual report or the bylaw, the historical information written by Mary will be available there. So if anybody's listening and they are history buff, I'm not sure exactly when it'll go up, but it'll probably be soon after we adopt this and council adopts it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Council, you've heard me read the motion previously that Councillor Black has recommended, so I will call the question. Those in favor? And no one is opposed to that, so it does carry. Chris, I think we might have time to get our final report on heritage designations. That is staff report DCS 17-27, a similar Norfolk Heritage Committee designation report for the Delhi Tobacco Kiln on page 98. Could you present that one as well, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, very briefly, this is just a stone's throw from the Quantz Mill. It's the Delhi Tobacco Kiln, which has been restored. It's right at the adjacent to the entrance to the Delhi Museum. For the same reasons, again, a report has been put together, a research report, which identifies all of those designated features. And just to answer Mayor Luke's comment about seeing this, of course, when we do the official placking and unveiling, all of council and the public are invited to that. And I can assure you that our staff will have the buildings open for viewing and provide you an opportunity to see into these great areas. So without, again, getting into the details, everything's spelled out. It's our normal procedure, and the research paper that forms part of the bylaw has been included for your information.
Thank you very much, Chris. My first speaker is Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be pleased to move the recommendations. Just offer some comment here, thanking Mary Cahill for an excellent report again. And these kilns, the report says they're iconic. They are iconic. I believe at one time there was close to 10,000 of these kilns, these stick kilns. They're called stick kilns. They be used over and over again over probably a 50-year period, starting back from 1923. So it is, when people come to this year, I remember someone came from Quebec once and they asked me, who lives in those houses that are in these villages on the farm? And why are the windows not open? It's kind of interesting. Anyway, very popular, and thank Mr. Oscar and Godlieve Lava for donating it, and the Rotary Club of Delhi for helping finance that kiln to be in there, put in there forever and ever, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. For the longest time, I always wondered why these kilns were green tar paper and red doors. I found out, I stand to be corrected, I understand it had to do with pricing. Red paint was cheap and so was green tar paper, and that's why they all ended up the same color. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's also interesting to know. I see no other speakers on this motion, so I'm going to take Councillor Columbus's offer to move the motion, and that is that Staff Report DCS 17-27, the heritage designation of the tobacco kiln in Delhi, be received as information, and that the request for heritage designation of the Delhi tobacco kiln, as recommended by our Heritage Committee in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act, be approved. And further, that the clerk be directed to undertake the necessary procedures to designate this tobacco kiln of historic significance under the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the necessary bylaw be presented to council for adoption. Those in favor of that motion? No one is opposed to that, so it too is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to take approximately a 15-minute break to allow council to get up and stretch their legs and make sure our presentations are ready to go. We will reconvene at 5 p.m. Thank you.